Hey everyone, good morning. So I thought I would pop in today and I would do a little quick snippet video, and I'm going to call this one so that's how it works. So you may remember, so this is my stamp set TS096, which is the Dreamcatcher stamps, and lots of people get confused by the little quarter cut pieces more than anything else. And you may remember when I did my release on release night, I always do something like this now. I tend to do it quite often, just showing what you can do with those stamps. Okay, so what I thought I would do today was to pop in and make this quick video just showing you some of the ways and the best way to get these to fit together, to be able to make some of these elements. I'm not going to do every element on the page, but hopefully it will give you a little bit more clarity if you've got these stamps, or you were thinking about these stamps, or you've got them but you've not used those little quarter cut bits yet because you're not sure how to use them. I thought I would pop in and show you what I have done. So this was my sample board. I did lots of different things on here. So obviously the stamp set was made to be a dream catcher. Primarily that was the idea, but you know me, I don't like to just have them do one thing. They need to do other things. So you can see I made some flowers, I did some dangles using the beads, and I wanted there to be different variations on the dream catcher so that you wouldn't necessarily make one and then and that would be it, and you wouldn't have anything else. So by having the different elements just means that it can be changed up a bit. We can do different things with it. So that was my idea for the stamp set, and these were some of the ideas that I came up with. Now this is not, you know, this is not the be all and end all. You can certainly do more than I've done. I always like to give you a few ideas when it's release day, so that you can kind of see what I've come up with. I only normally play for probably an hour and a half, 90 minutes to 2 hours doing something like this, just to see what I can come up with. So you can see I've got different variations on the centerpiece and those quarter cuts and the smaller elements as well. But I've also made flowers because you all know I love flowers, and why not be able to do something different with your stamps? So, and of course, so something like this, so I did put this on Velcro just so that I could lift it up. So this is made from one of the centerpieces and one of the feathers. So, and this small circle, but of course something like this could go in the middle of this, which is going to give it a very different look again. It could go in the middle of this. It's going to give it a very different look again. And this. And then obviously the same with some of the smaller pieces. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to talk anymore. You kind of get the idea. What I'm going to do, I've already pre-stamped some images so that you don't have to watch me stamping, and we're just going to go through a few different things, how to get your quarter cut pieces lined up nicely so that they look good when you put them down, and we'll see what else we can come up with. So I'm going to put this to one side. I've put a blank black sheet underneath just so that it's easier for you to see what I am doing. So I've already pre-stamped. So I've pre-stamped some different bits and pieces if you want to have a go. I've pre-stamped some different bits and pieces, and then we can see what we can come up with. So the first thing I'm going to do, I am going to cut out one of these pieces. Now let me just grab my glasses, because if I don't do that, I can't see anything. Let me give them a clean, because then I can't see anything. And I'm going to cut out one of these. So let's do one of these first, and we'll see what we can come up with. Now obviously I could cut around these little nodules. I'm not going to do that. For the purpose of what we're going to do today, I am just going to cut out the circle, because I don't want to spend more time cutting out than I need to. Okay, so let's go in. We'll just cut this out very quickly. Now, obviously you can spend more time doing this, but let's just get it cut out. and then we'll be able to start piecing some stuff together. Okay, so my first part for a dream catcher, and it's fine as it is, and if I just wanted to add some feathers to that and maybe a centerpiece, of course I could do that. So if I decided, maybe I decided I just want one of these small ones to go with it, so let's just cut one of those out. I just want to give you some ideas of how these can be used and how they can be changed up, because I know obviously I've shown this on release night, but I know it's very easy to forget without going back and looking at videos. And if you're anything like me, I find it much easier to remember if I actually do something. So I've got this one, maybe I could have this one, I could pop that up, I could glue it down. Obviously I could colour it. I'm not going to colour it for the purposes of what we're doing today. That would be perfectly fine, and I could have some feathers coming off of that, a few beads here and there. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Okay, what if I want to make this bigger? So if I want to make this bigger, this was the idea of having these quarter cut pieces, the longer quarter cut pieces in particular. Okay, so what we're going to do with those, let me just cut it down just slightly so I haven't got a large piece of card, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do. I find it, I don't know about you, but I find it much easier to cut out if I only have smaller pieces. Okay, I'm going to cut these into pieces, and this is the easiest way. Of course you can stamp these. Okay, I have stamped these direct paper, and I have managed to get them near enough perfect. I won't say exactly, but near enough perfect. But obviously a rubber stamp is not that great. You can't see through it. You can't see the edges. And obviously there's always going to be a little lip going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab a pencil. Let me just grab a pencil. I'm just going to bring you in just for a second, and I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do. So for each circle, you need 4 pieces of card. Okay, you need 4 pieces, and what you're going to do, 2 of them we don't need to do anything with. 2 of them we can put to one side, and then 2 of them, and obviously when you start doing this, you do not have to draw this. You can do this by hand. Okay, but what we're going to do is 2 of them, we're just going to extend and add. Hopefully you can see that, and it doesn't matter what size it is. It doesn't need to be a particular size. Just need a little lip at either end. Okay, so 2 of these, we're just going to give them a little small lip. Okay, and the same the other end, and then 2 we will leave. So the other 2, you can see we're just going to leave those as they are. So you want 2 as they are and 2 with a little lip at the end. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is bring you back out. You don't need to be that close. So what I'm going to do, the 2 that have just been left, we're not going to cut into this space. Okay, so we're not going to cut in, we're just going to cut straight across. Okay, so we're going to cut straight across, and then we're going to cut round. Like, as I said, I am not going to worry about the little scallopy rope bit around the edge, not for what we're doing today. And what I would tend to do normally is just ink the edges anyway. Okay, so when I get to the other side, I'm going to do the same, and I'm just going to cut straight across. Okay, so straight across, and then I'm going to cut round. Okay, so that gives me my first piece. So I'm going to do the same with the second one. So this one, again, we're just going to cut it out as it is and go straight across at those edges. So we'll cut that, we'll go straight across, we'll go around, and we'll go straight across. Okay, so that gives us 2 pieces where we've cut them out as they are. So for the second one, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to cut around that little tab this time. So I've given myself a little tab. I find it much easier to do it this way. Okay, and then we're going to cut it off. And what you tend to do, once you know what you're doing, I don't even draw the tab in. I will literally just cut it out as I go. Okay, but for the purpose of what we're doing right this second, obviously I want to show you what I am doing. Okay, now what I'm going to do, you don't have to do this, but I find it tidies it up if you just cut a little corner off of each side as well. Okay, you don't have to do this because it just means you'll cut off any excess bits afterwards, but obviously if you do it first, it's already done. Okay, so we've got that one, and then we'll do the same on the other one. And like I said, once you start doing this, you don't need to draw it in. I've drawn it in just to show you what I am doing. Okay, but you certainly don't need to. You know, I can sit there now, I could literally just sit there, cut the tabs, cut the little corners off. You can kind of see I'm doing it as I go along. Okay, so you don't need to make extra work for yourself. If you're more comfortable drawing it in first, by all means draw it in first, but you certainly don't need to, because it doesn't need to be any particular way, as long as it's done, as long as when you're finished you have two pieces that have got tabs and two pieces that are plain. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to grab some white glue. Okay, whatever your favorite glue is, it doesn't matter. Okay, but I find it easier to do this with glue, because if you're doing it with glue, you have some wiggle room to move things around. Okay, so what I do is I will place one, it doesn't really matter which way you do it, but I tend to do one with a tab at the top, one with a tab at the bottom. Doesn't matter, they could be at the sides, it really doesn't matter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny bit of glue to the tab. Tiny bit of glue to the tab. You don't need very much because you don't want it seeping out all over the place. So tiny bit of glue to the tab, and then we're going to get our piece and we're going to put it on, and we're going to put it on. Okay, we're going to line it up. Okay, so that's half the job. But of course the reason we want to use white glue is because we want time to mess about with this side as well if we need to move anything around. Okay, so then I'm going to go in, a little bit of glue there. Oh, it's probably a bit much. Let's take some of that. We don't want tons of glue all around the place. So now I can go in with this piece on top of the tab and this piece, and I've just got a little bit of time because I've used white glue. I have a little bit of time to play around lining things up. Now these are all drawn by hand. Okay, so they are not going to be 100% perfect. If you want 100% perfect, then you buy something that's been made digitally or, you know, by machine. Mine are not, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. You know, and if I had any little bits sticking out either side, this is why I said about adding the tabs. So if you turn around, you can see there's like tabs going on. This is why I said about adding the tabs, because what tends to happen is sometimes you might get a little bit of the tab sticking out if you don't taper those in. But of course you can cut those off, it's not a problem. So what we have now is we have this, which means that we can now go in with this. So now we have a piece which is a good couple of inches bigger, you know. So we started off, our centre circle was around the 3-inch mark. Okay, so our centre circle, so you would have had a 3-inch dream catcher. We're now, by doing this, we're now at 4 3/4. So it just means you can have a bigger piece. Okay, so you can have a bigger piece. Of course, we can go in, we could add this one. So now we've got something, and of course we can raise this up. We can glue it down, but we can also raise it up, which is going to give it some dimension as well. Okay, so that's the first piece. Okay, so I've got that done. I'm going to put that to one side. So obviously the same thing is going to apply with the smaller quarter circles. So let's do those quickly. I just want to give you a few So I'm not going to draw out my tab this time. I'm just going to show you how I would do it normally, because I'm not going to draw out my tab, but it would be exactly the same process. So 2 of them need little tabs on the end, and 2 of them need to be cut out as they are. What I tend to do is I don't even draw my tabs on anymore. I just do it as I do it by eye, because they don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be a specific shape. You just need a tab. Okay, so I would just go in, and obviously it's going to make it quicker. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to cut out 2 in the normal shape. And again, I'm going straight across, so I'm not going into those little areas. We don't want to do that, because then you're going to end up with a blank space in between. We don't want that. Okay, so we'll go round. This is number 2. So this is 2 which are just normal. So 2 normal ones, and then I'm going to do 2 which I'm going to cut the tabs. So, and this time I'm just going to do it, I'm going to do it without drawing, just to show you how easy it is. I'm sure you can figure it out. So I'm just going to go in. When I get to the end, I'm just going to go across, just cut a little tab. You can see I'm not even worrying. They're different on different sides, they're different angles. It doesn't matter. If you feel better drawing it in first, by all means draw it in first. Really don't need to though. They don't have to be a certain size. You just need to have a small tab. Okay, so let's do the other one. My tabs will be all different shapes. None will be the same, but it doesn't matter. They're going to tuck in behind, and it's just to give us something to anchor those other pieces too. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to do top and bottom. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on my tabs. These ones are a little bit smaller, but a bit of glue on my tabs. I can then go in. Let's put one down. Let's tuck the other one underneath. That's looking okay. Okay, I'm pushing it down, but then I've still got room, because I've used white glue rather than double-sided tape. Obviously, it just means we've got a little bit more time to play, to move stuff around. And I find it's the easiest way to get it to work. So we've got time to line stuff up. Okay, so this one, let's put it on. I've got a little bit of time to move things. And if it's not perfect, it really doesn't matter, but it just gives you that bit of time to play around. Do you know what? That's fine. Okay, so that gives me my second piece. Okay, so now I've got the option. Okay, I've got different pieces going on now. So I could have this one in the middle. That will work. I could have, so I have the bigger circle. So let's cut that out. So we've got 3 different size circles in this pack. So you'll kind of see we've got the large circle, then we've got the medium, then we've got the small. Okay, and then we've got the 2 quarter pieces. So let's just cut this one out. Again, I could cut round the little bobbles, but I'm not going to for the purpose of what we're doing, because I just want to get it done. We don't need, you can take your time. So of course what it means now is I've got this scenario, so I could just have this. So this is around, it's a tiny bit bigger I think, but it's around the same size, this circle, as this. Okay, so it does mean that this will also fit inside this. So you could have it like this, You could have this. You could have this one on top if you wanted to have this one on top. You can swap it out. You could just have it on its own. You could have just this, and you could have a coloured background in behind. You could have this. You could have this. You could have this popping up. You could have this in the middle. So there's lots of different options already just by putting those two pieces together. So let's put those to one side. So what you can also do is with the flowers or with the circles, we can make flowers. So let's just cut these into a couple of pieces because I find it so much easier. So let's start. I'm going to start with the little one. So the little one, yes, we can have the full circle. Of course we can, with the rope around the edge. We could have it and just take the rope edge off. Or what we could do is we could cut this. Let me just cut around that. We could cut this into a little flower on its own in the middle. Okay, because again, that will give us different options. So if I just cut into the centre, you can see we've got this kind of star-shaped flower going on in the middle of this, okay? So if I go in, you'll kind of see what I am doing. Okay, so let's go back the other way. Can you see there's a little star flower emerging? So again, this is going to be good because it's going to give us something else. You all know me. I like to put a lot of stuff onto dimensionals. I love my dimensions on a project. So, you know, straight away I could have this. So this is what I've got from this. Okay, so I've got a little star flower going on. So of course that means one, I could have it popped up onto the small flower if I wanted to really give me some dimension going on. I could use it in the centre of this one. So straight away, if you kind of look at this, even as a standalone, if you look at this one as a standalone and then look at it with this on, it looks very different. It gives it a different vibe, okay? The same with this. So if we've got this as it is. What if we put this in the centre? We get a very different look. So it just means that you can be using your stamps in more than one way, okay? So you can, you know me by now, I don't like stamps to only be for one thing, okay? So it could go in the centre of there. So lots of ways just by having these little pieces, okay? So the next thing is obviously with these bigger pieces, okay? So we've got, so for me, there's 3 different flower types in this. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab, bear with me, I'm just going to grab a black pen. I must have a black pen here somewhere. Let's just grab this. So I'm just going to use a uni ball just to show you what I am looking at cutting out. So on flower 1, what I am going to do is, I'm just going to do this roughly. I'm going to cut out these bits. Okay, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to cut out these. This is going to be a base. Okay. I'm doing this just so that you can see. Obviously you don't need to colour this in. You'll be able to see what you need to cut out. Okay, so straight away, let's have a look. Let's give this a cut out. But straight away you can see that's going to give it a very different look altogether, because all of a sudden we haven't got this circle anymore. We've got this kind of flowery shape. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this one out. I'm going to go ahead and cut this. So, and I'm not going to cut around the bobbles. I'm going to cut it into a point. Okay. So I'm literally going to cut in on each piece. Okay. And I'm just going to cut that out. I always do everything in one direction first, and I go back in the other direction. I find it the quickest and easiest way to cut out, especially something like this, because it's very much straight lines. So you're cutting all in one direction and kind of turning. My scissors, if you look at my scissors, my hand with my scissors is staying still, and I'm literally just turning the paper piece in my hand. Okay, and then go back the other way. So now I can go back in the other direction. As I said, I'm just doing this into a point. I'm not cutting out those bobbles. Of course you could if you wanted to. I am not going to do that. I try and make my stamps easy to cut out. It's not always possible, because sometimes I do things where, you know, there's something specific I want and it's not going to be easy to cut out, and that's the way it is. But I try to make them quite easy and quite straightforward. Okay, so there we go. So first one looks very different straight away. Okay, so second one, what we're going to do is we're going to take out, we'll take out all of this. Okay, so we're going to take out all of this in between. Okay, and it's going to leave us, hopefully you can see what it's doing. I don't want to spend all day colouring in. But what it's going to leave us is this little piece, or the little flower, that is in the centre. And as I said, you do not need to colour this in before you cut it out. I'm just doing it for you so you can see what I'm doing. So I know sometimes there's a lot of lines going on in this stamp, and sometimes it's not that easy to see. Okay, so you can see what we end up with when I cut this out will be this smaller flower in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to cut in. I'm cutting into a point. I am not messing around cutting around those bobbles. Of course, if you wanted to, of course you can go ahead and do that. Certainly for what we're doing today, I am not going to do that. I'm just going to cut them out. So again, I'm just going around in one direction first, and then I'll go the other way. It just means I can get this done a bit quicker. You don't want to sit and watch me cutting out forever. Okay. Okay, so we've got that, and now we can go back in the other direction and just cut these pieces off. And again, I've just cut it into a point, because normally as well I would ink around the edge of these. So obviously if I'm inking around the edge, it's kind of disguising where those little bobbly bits are at the end, because obviously we've got a little black tip at the end. But to be quite honest, it looks fine just with the black tip at the end where we're cutting into a point. But you know, if that bothers you, you can just ink around the edges. It will get rid of all of that. Okay, so that gives us that part. Okay, so straight away we could curl this a little bit. You know, we can do some petal shaping, but straight away this looks like a flower now. Okay, whichever way you look at it, this looks like a flower. What if we go in this in the centre. That looks really cute. We could go in with this in the centre. That looks really cute. What if we went in with this now? So that's really cute. We can play around. What if we take this one out, put this one in? So now we've got a different look again, you know. So lots of different ways, but we've got something that looks very different now. And obviously it will look different again if it's coloured. You know, it's going to look different if you colour it in. Because then you can choose your colours, you know, it's much more exciting than black and white. Although I do love black and white. Okay, so that's our second bit. And we've got one more that we're going to cut out because there's one more flower shape that I can see in this. And then what we're going to do for that is we're going to come in and we're going to take out every other. Let me just take this off so you can see. We're going to take out every other petal. Okay. So we're going to go one and then we'll take out every other. So on that first one, we didn't. We just kept all of the petals. What we're going to do on this one is we're going to take out every other in between. I think you could do some really good, I've not done it yet, but you could do some really good doodling on this as well. On these flowers. Would look really, really cool. Maybe I'll do that. Not today, but maybe I'll do that and give it a go. But I think you could get some really nice looks. So hopefully you can kind of see what's happening. By taking out every other petal, which is what we're going to do now, we get a different shaped flower again. We get a completely different shape. So let's go ahead and cut this one out. Just cut around it. Okay, so this is what we've ended up with. Again, we're going to cut it into a point. I'm just going to go round and I'm going to cut in to a point. So this is this now gives us a completely different shape petal. And a different shaped flower. So how cool that we can go from a dream catcher. Doesn't have to be a dream catcher at all. Now we can use it to make some flowers. We can make a flower bouquet, whatever, you know, whatever we like. But we can use it in a different way. And you all know, for me, that is one of the most important things with my stamps, is to be able to use them in different ways. Okay. In nearly there. So this is what I normally do when I get my stamps. This is one of the things that I do. One thing I do, you've all seen, I stamp into my composition book and I see what they can do in there. And the other thing that I do is I like to see if I can make other things. So you can see, obviously, this could be coloured. Let's curl the edges, just because it's going to make it stand out a bit more when I put them together. So now, let's do this one as well. Let's just curl the edges a little bit. Of course, we don't have to. We could just pop them up flat onto foam tape. We could do rainbow colours. We could do them all one colour. I'm thinking you really could do some doodling on these, because you've got these three different sections. You could do something really cool with that. So now I've got the option. So this was my first piece where we cut out all of the petals and just cut the circle away. And then the second one we've got, we can offset. So I could offset that. So you can see if I offset that, it's going to look very different to if I set it. where it's just going to be layered on top. So you can do either of those. You can offset, which is going to give you a different look. You can just layer it on top. Okay, but then obviously, so now we've also got this piece. This piece could go in the middle. Again, you could offset it, or you could just have it on top. Okay, and then again, so now we've got our centerpieces. So we could have that one in the center. We could have that one in the center. So that's making quite a big flower now. You know, this one is probably not far off 3 inches, I would say. So yeah, about 2 3/4 inches across. So that's a decent sized flower for a page. You could just have, so you could take this one away. Let's move this one to one side. We could just have this one. You could have this one on its own. There's nothing wrong with that. And we could have a little centre to it. Of course, we could pop that up. We could have 2 of these. So if we had 2 of these, we could offset them, and that would make a completely different flower. We'd have just this one on its own. We could have this one and this one, and we could have those together. We're just getting some dimension going on. Okay, so hopefully this is kind of making sense, that we can just do different things. And of course, so these as well can be, you know, so if I've got something like this, I could have this, and then I could have this in the middle. So this looks very different again. You know, I could have this, I could have this in the middle. How cool does that look? And then maybe that with one of the centers in the middle. So, you know, and even if, you know, I've curled these up, but even if that was flat and it was raised up, so we had some foam tape underneath and we raised it, it's going to look very different. It's going to give you a different look again for another dream catcher, so that you haven't got the same thing going on all the time. And then what if we bring, you know, what if we bring this one in, and then we've got this one around it? Now we've got a different look again. So you can get lots of different looks for your, you know, for your dream catchers, so that you're not doing the same thing over and over. What if we do this and have a black background, or have a coloured background? You know, we could put some coloured card behind there. We could put some painted card behind there. Maybe something like that. Maybe something like that with that on top, with some coloured card in behind. And then, you know, or painted card in behind. Now we've got, and we could have our feathers coming down. Now we've got a different dream catcher altogether. So on my original one as well, I did do, let me just bring it back in. I did do one with the feathers as well. I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to cut out a load of feathers. They are a little bit more time consuming to cut those out. But you can kind of see I've done the same thing. I've done, so we've got, you know, we've got these 2 pieces. And then I've just cut some of the feathers out, and I've made a flower out of the feathers as well. So of course you can do that as well. Okay. You can also see I've got this little tiny flower. So this little tiny one is basically this one cut out twice. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. I've cut every other point the same way as we did with this one. So I cut every other point on that one, and then I cut the very centre. It is very small, but sometimes you need small flowers. So, you know, it kind of made sense. So that is those. Hopefully that's given you a few ideas with those. Let's put those to one side for a minute. And I just want to do something very quickly. I just want to show you something very quickly with the little beads, okay? So when you get your stamp set, your beads are going to be joined together, okay? They're going to be all joined in one piece. Now, I found it best to use a little, like a little baggie to keep them in. You know, this kind of thing. I've got some small ones that I tend to use for all of my small pieces that are in my stamp set, because obviously this is going to come in one piece, which is great. And not a problem. If you just want to stamp them and cut them out, of course, it's not a problem. Okay, but if you want to use them in different ways, you need to cut this apart. I found the best way to cut it apart, don't use craft knife, just use some sharp scissors. Okay, they're already kind of separated. We can literally just go in with a sharp pair of scissors. You kind of hold in between the two and just snip. Okay, And that's going to give us that stamp. And then we can go in between the two and just snap. Okay. Now, and this is why I'm saying about the baggie, because all of a sudden you've gone from one stamp, and I think you end up with 9, if I remember rightly. So you're going to end up with 9 little stamps. You do not want to lose those in your pack of stamps. So a little baggie, put them in there. I put the little word stamps in mine as well. This is a new set. This is why these have not been cut apart yet. But in my set that I use all the time, which is in my craft bag, which was at a class on Saturday, which is why I'm cutting open a new set. Okay, and you can cut, you know, all these little edges, of course, with a sharp pair of scissors. You can just trim those off, okay? And that way I've got all these little stamps. Okay, so I've got these little stamps ready to go. And what that means is, because I've got these small stamps, it now means I've got many, many, many more options of what I can do with these, okay? So let's put these to one side for a minute. So let's bring this back in just so you can see. So one of the things that I did was I created these little, you know, almost like little totems. But of course I can do that now because the stamps are taken apart. So I can literally just go in and stamp. The same, I've got like little word banners. So little word banners. Of course I can do that now. I've got little scallops. I've got little flowers. You know, I've got little bows. There's lots of things that you can do by taking them apart. So don't be afraid to take them apart. Let's grab, I'm just going to grab, I've got a scrap piece of paper. Let's use the scrap piece. We don't like wasting paper, do we? So let's see. Let's grab a word. So I'm going to do love. So what it means now is I can get my stamps. So let's go love, and I'm going to do this in the centre. I need to give myself a little bit of space because I'm going to stamp on either side. And then I can pick, right, what stamps do I want to use? Let's start, I'm going to start with the little triangle. Okay, and then I can go in, and these do not have to be perfect. So I'm just going to go in, especially as we're using them for word banners. So it doesn't matter if they don't line up in the centre. Okay, go in. Okay, which one shall I do next? Let's go in with the little pointy one. I do like the little pointy one. And then all I'm doing is I'm just going to bring it over. I'm just overlapping just a tiny bit. So the end of my stamp, I'm just overlapping just a tiny bit. And if I do the same distance on both sides, then I know that it's going to line up. Okay, so maybe the little circle, the little spotty circle. That's cute. So so when I stamped, I've got a little gap in between here. Okay, I didn't overlap enough. So what if I just go in with that little tiny, tiny, tiny bead? Okay, what if I just go in now and go between the two to join it up? It looks fine. And I could add a little bit of stickles. I could add a little gemstone on there. And of course, I can make this as long as I like. So I can just keep going. So maybe now, let's go in, overlap just a little bit. I find if I overlap just a tiny bit, because you've got a little lip of rubber, obviously, at the end. So this now, I could have this as a word banner, and I could have this going across a, so like a card front. I could cut it out with a white border around the edge, colour it in, and I could have this going across a card front, so that would work really well. And obviously that's the same, it's kind of the same principle as I've done with this one, where I've done it as like a totem. That could be hanging off of a page, it could go down the side of a page. The word doesn't have to be in the middle. It doesn't have to be big. It could be smaller. It could be smaller. You know, you can make these any size with any configuration. So you could have lots of different configurations. So even with this, you know, what if I didn't even want the word in the middle, but what if I did this as a band? So I went across with a band, and then what if I wanted my flower to be in the middle? So I could have this cut out. I could have a band going across the page of a card, across the page of a journal page. And then I could use this as, instead of a word in the middle, I could have one of my flowers in the middle. Okay. So maybe one of the bigger flowers. Why not? A bigger flower in the middle, and then really extend this out. I could have it that... we could have it that it's coming down the page. So we could have it coming down the page. So if you imagine we could have beads coming all the way down, then maybe we could have our flower dangling on the end. You know, we could have it dangling so that it makes a feature out of the beads, and we could have lots of beads in different lengths dangling down the page. That would be really cool, actually. That would look really nice. So you could have it dangling on the page and have different lengths, different flowers, so different size flowers. If you imagine, you know, you've got this little one, then you've got a bigger one, and you've got different sizes going on the page. Would look fantastic. And you could do these directly onto the page, or you could do them separately, cut them out and have them suspended. So maybe you could have an open frame and you could have these suspended on the page. So hopefully I'm giving you lots of ideas. So we've got that. Obviously we can do that in lots and lots of different ways. I did a little flower with the circle, so the little spotty circle. So let's just do that. Let's just show how I did that. So a little spotty circle, okay, and then the little triangle-y flower. And what I did with this to get, if I bring this in just so you can see what I'm talking about, this little flower, okay? The easiest way to do this is, I think of a clock face. So I'm just going to overlap just slightly. And I'm going to stamp at 12 o'clock. And I'm going to stamp at 6 o'clock. Now, normally I stand up so I can see, but I'm not. So it might be a little bit off. Okay, so I've done 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So now that means I can literally, I'm thinking about this needs to be before 3 o'clock. It needs to be on the side of this, but before 3 o'clock. So it means I can go in and go, okay. I use clock face in my crafting quite a lot. So obviously now we've got that, I can go in between. Okay, and then the same the other side. So what I want to do now is make sure the side of the stamp is after 9 o'clock. Because if I make sure it's after 9 o'clock, I know I'm going to have a little space in the middle. I'll have a little space in between, and I know that I'll be able to fit them in. Okay, so now we've got a 6-petal flower that we could cut out, which would be really cool. In fact, let's cut it out, because if we cut that out, let's cut it out. Because obviously, if we cut this out, I just want to see how it would look on our little dream catchers. I'm just going to do this very quick. So if my cutting out is not perfect, I apologise, but you'll kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to do. So let's just cut these out. And this is really cute. So the two little beads, just by cutting them apart, we've got this secondary flower. So again, that just means, let's bring you out just a little bit. You don't need to be quite that close, do you, right now? So it just means that we've got there's lots of different options. You know, with the one stamp set, you can do lots of different things. And it's not going to look like you've used just one stamp set. You know how it is. Especially if you're a card maker, well, and a journaler, you don't want to use the same things all the time, because then you kind of get it into your head that everything looks samey. But if you've got lots of options of how to use your stamps, it just means you're going to have lots of different options for building things up. So now I could have one of these. That looks quite cool. I think that looks quite good. I could also, it could go in there. That looks quite good as well, which means I've got a different flower again. It doesn't even have to be a flower. It could just be a centre. So what if we put it in there? That looks very different by adding it to that. Don't know if I would add it to this one, because this one's smaller. So would I? Probably not. I probably wouldn't add it to that. But again, you know, what if we put that one in the centre? Okay, and then what if that goes in the centre? And that goes in the centre. Or that goes in the centre. So we're getting something that looks, you know, or this one. So put this one in. And let's put this one in. We're getting something that looks very different. And of course, when you colour it, it's going to look different anyway, because you've got the differentiation in colour. So that looks really cool. You can also do a little 4-petal flower. So exactly the same. So exactly the same. We're going to go in, stamp our little bead. Then we're going to go in with our little triangle. And all we're going to do this time is think about clock face. So 6 o'clock. I always do 12 and 6 first. I just do. So we've got a little bow. If we turned it like that, we've got a little bow. Okay, if we wanted to just leave it as it is. And then if we go 6 and 9, we have a little 4-petal flower that we can cut out. And then we can use that. We could use the little tiny bead, so the little tiny one. Okay, we could go in with that, the little tiny bead, and then go in with this little triangle one. This triangle one is really handy, I find, but we can go in with that one. What if we do that one? So 12 and 6. I would take a bit more time and I would make sure that I'm overlapping in the centre, but you can kind of see what's happening. So now we've got a different shape flower. We've got a different shape again. We could do a little bow with this one. So what if we go, okay, let's stamp the little one. And then what if we go on either side of that? And now we've got a little bow going on. So there's lots and lots and lots of different ways that these can be used. You know, you could do two of the 4-petal flowers, cut them out, and you could stack them. You know, put one on top of the other. You're going to get a different look again. So lots and lots and lots of different ways to do these and to be using them and stacking them up, etc., etc. So let's put this to one side. No, let's keep it, because obviously we want to see what we've done. So you can see I have, let's bring you out a little bit. I've got lots of different pieces now that I've got cut out, but from those lots of different pieces, there are lots and lots of different options to stack those up and turn them into something. So I don't think there's anything else to show you right now. Let's move these to one side. Let's clear my desk. I've only been doing this, I don't know, half an hour, and the mess that I've made is unbelievable. If you're anything like me, my goodness. So I just bring that back in just so that you can see. I will take a screenshot of these as well and put it into my cafe group. because obviously it's always nicer if you can actually see photos as well, and that way if you want to save the photos you can do that. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that that has explained how the devil does that work, and makes it easier for you and gives you lots and lots of ideas. So thank you for stopping by. Hopefully I will get to do some more of this type of video. Let me know if you'd like to see that, and I will see you again very soon. Bye bye.